We all face a time in our life where a particular season or obstacle feels a little bit heavier to carry than the other previous ones. This particular time and how we walk through it, grieve it, overcome it is crucial because it can determine the rest of our future. When we are met with a life that has given us lemons, and we don't know how to deal with that, the outcome of how we choose to walk through that particular season will determine if we become better or bitter. Many of us are likely walking through difficult seasons all simultaneously, different seasons, but equally difficult. Life is not gentle, and life picks no favorites. We all have our version of challenge. And so I want to speak to you today directly. Some of you may be carrying a season of life that feels so extremely heavy. Maybe it's not just one particular thing. Maybe it's multiple things, layered things, things that you're grieving, things that you don't know how to explain, things that have been delayed, things that have disappointed you, things that have brought uncertainty, insecurity, and maybe some pressures that you don't like talking about or don't want to. And as much as I want to validate all of those very heavy emotions, and as much as I know that they're real, something subtle can begin to happen. In the middle of dealing with all of these things, you can stop seeing individual problems, and then you start to believe one massive thing about your life. My life is just like this. These things just happen to me. Something about me has created this kind of thing. I just don't deserve good things. Maybe they get to have their dreams, but I don't. This particular lie that I feel like is more of a pit that sometimes we fall into, I want to very lovingly confront because it's very serious. And I know the weight of this lie because I've believed it. And actually, quite frankly, I've dealt with something recently where I fell into that pit. When hardship comes at me, when adversity comes my way, and it's one thing after another, it's very hard not to want to jump to that conclusion. And so before I even dive any further into this, I want you to know that it happens to all of us. So yes, recently I found myself here. I was carrying grief that I thought that I had already processed. Quite frankly, I was dealing with a number of things, a myriad of things, all kind of like sprinkled in all of the different facets of my life. And I had gotten to a point where I thought that I had pretty much grieved the other things. And I ended up having something come up in a different area of my life. And it was a situation with my horse, which it's vocalizing this in this particular setting, it seems really silly for me to be like, I was dealing with some pretty serious stuff. And then out of nowhere, my horse starts having issues. I feel like I kind of was a little bit overwhelmed with issues. I wasn't really sleeping very well at night. I was having some other things that I was dealing with in a more personal manner. And then, the one area of my life that is kind of like mine. It's nothing that I don't really share with anybody. I don't have to share it with my husband. I don't share it with my siblings. I don't share it with my, parents, immediate family. This is something that makes me me. And so while I'm having all these other things outside of this situation with him transpire and it feels out of control, I would go and spend time with my horse, and it was a way to feel grounded and like, okay, this is my thing. It's kind of where I turn off the noise of the world. And something came up and he was not doing well. And it just kind of was like the little bit of wind that knocked down my house of cards. And I just kind of mentally spiraled. He went lame in a way that I didn't know what was going on. I tried like everything that I knew that I knew to address it. And nothing was working. Time off was not working. Took him to the vet, and the vet was like, I don't know. It could be this, it could be that. But then at the same time, he's like, not lame enough. And it was just, it started to become another thing I couldn't control. It was just taking so much life out of me and inputting stress, which was another, thing. I was already dealing with other stuff that I was grieving. I was trying to process. I was trying to accept and let go. And then this pops up and it's like, I have nowhere safe to go to. And so I just remember really spiraling, feeling like at one point when I'm in a different part of a grief process over here. Now something's going on with my horse, and it just feels like every part of my life is being touched by grief. And I got to a point where I was like, you know what? This is why I can't have nice things. That only reinforced the depression. It reinforced the grief and the sadness. I spent so much time crying, and all I felt was just hopelessness. The tipping point was with my horse, because there were other things about my life that I can't control. So while I am in this place of like, this was the one thing that I had, while I was dealing with other things, it just felt like, yeah, that lie came up of like, well, this is just why I can't have nice things. Like, there's something about my life that just stuff goes wrong. And it led me into a horrible spiral of just shifting my entire perspective into kind of perpetuating this lie in every other area of my life. And it made me a miserable person. And what that led to was I stopped just grieving the individual situations. I stopped grieving the individual issues and the parts of my life, outside of my control. I stopped being able to see things. I don't want to say see things with the silver lining, but I stopped being able to see hope. I lost the joy. I lost hope. And I just started to believe things as a whole about my life. This is dangerous. When you start creeping into this place where you take, maybe there's a myriad of things going on in your life. Maybe life has not been rainbows and butterflies for you. And it's been, hurdle after hurdle or obstacle after obstacle. And you start to do what I did, and you start to spiral and try to reconcile in your mind, like, why are things going wrong? And then you start believing things about your life as a whole. And it's very dangerous, because suddenly everything becomes evidence. We're trying to prove our theory, as I'm Nancy Drewing my problems in my life, trying to figure out, why is it going wrong? And we say to ourselves, see, oh, another thing went wrong. See, nothing ever works out. See, nobody cares. My dreams don't matter. And I'm telling you, I did all of this literally a couple weeks ago when I was spiraling. There was so much evidence to the contrary, because I was looking for reasons to validate the feelings that I was having, the frustrations, this is out of my control. I don't know what's going on. And the emotions are real in that moment, but it's very dangerous to just dive headfirst into there must be a reason why all of it is happening. So when this happens, the circumstances may not change. Things may still go wrong, but the interpretation of the circumstances as a whole or as individual things, that's what changes. And it's very, very dangerous because of how it plays in your mind and what it does to you, your belief systems, your perspective, the things that you declare over yourself. It changes everything. And so I want us to talk about all of this together today. So if I haven't welcomed you already, welcome back to the Inheritance Podcast. Let's dive in. So let's talk about how people end up here, where hopelessness and frustration, anger, all that is kind of like the reigning thing. Most people don't wake up believing their life is hopeless. Like, I genuinely don't. For the most part, like, when I wake up in the day, I'm like, all right, let's tackle another day. It's like a fresh start. So most people don't just jump to this conclusion, when one adversity happens, or like when they get out of bed. It's a drift. It happens slowly over time. It's one setback, then a disappointment, then a delay, then a loss, then another, and then the cycle repeats, or more things get added, paralleled or set up next to this other thing. Here's how we end up getting here. So like I said, life does not pick favorites. So adversity is going to happen to all of us. I don't think that anybody just wakes up after one adversity or a couple or three and they're like, man, my life sucks. Like, my life is hopeless. I think saddled up next to this particular thing is what leads to this hopelessness. We all, at least I can speak for myself and my generation and maybe some generations prior to me, we were all sold a version of life. Like, oh, here's how your life is going to go. You'll be born, you'll be raised by somebody, then you're going to graduate high school, And then you'll get married, then you'll buy the house, and then you'll have the kids, and then you'll retire peacefully. You'll have money in your 401k. You're going to do this, you're going to do that. And all your dreams are going to come true. And this is, you go down the list of checking the boxes, and everybody's life is going to be completely linear, no detours, nothing. But like, this is how everyone's life should be. If it's the version of the American dream or, whatever dream it is, this is how we expect life to go. And so maybe, one adversity here or there isn't really that big of a deal. But if it hinders the order of how life is supposed to go, and at certain ages, like, okay, we know that we're going to graduate high school at 18. We know that if we date somebody through high school, or like after we graduate high school, we're going to go to college, maybe we date during college, then that will lead to the marriage. And then we buy the house and we land the career that gives us the house. And then we're going to buy, we're not going to rent. Like, I feel like you guys are getting the gist of how we end up in this mental space, because quite a few of us are not checking all of those boxes, and we're aging out of the phases, the milestones when we should be checking those boxes, if you catch my drift. The issue with the adversities, like say, I turned 25 and I'm not married yet, disappointment. Or I turned 30 and I don't have children, disillusionment. Whatever the case may be, maybe you don't land that career, maybe you don't get to buy that house, a different kind of adversity. And the issue with these two things getting to walk hand in hand in our life and our expectations, which we've talked about the danger of expectations in a previous episode, so go check that out, is that we don't just attach ourselves to the goals. We attach ourselves to the timelines. We attach ourselves to the expectations. We put our identity inside of all of this stuff, our self-worth inside of all of this stuff. And we say, okay, well, if by 25 I marry my high school sweetheart, or I have children, or if I buy that house at this age, then I'm good. I don't know what good means for a lot of people, but there is some element of self-worth and expectations and an emotional part of our identity inside of these timelines. And it's like at some point when you start reaching that age where it's like, okay, I'm approaching the time where I said I was going to get married. I got to check this box really fast. It becomes a deadline of like, crap, I got to get my life together. Because if I don't do it by this time, what does that say about me? You see where this is going. And then when we pass that threshold, when we turn 25 and we're not married, when we don't have the children, when we don't buy the house, when we don't land the career, when we don't graduate college, whatever, when that happens, now there's a gap between the life that we expected, we planned for, and we attached ourselves to, and the life that we're actually living. And that's not fun. I'll be the one to say for all of us, I hate it. I don't like it. Because I ask myself this question when I have adversities, when I have disappointment, when I have things outside of my control that I can't make happen, when I don't check the box when I wished I could. I ask that question myself. What does this say about me? If somebody else could do it, if they could land the job, if they could buy the house, if they could have the kids, if they could be married, if they, what does it say about me if I can't or if I don't? So the gap between these two things, the life you expect and the reality of what you're living, where this is in the in-between, psychologists call this cognitive dissonance. And it's something that I want to kind of park here and talk about for a second because it's very important. And I feel like a lot of people find themselves here, but then they're just like, I don't know how to describe what I'm feeling. I just know it's 6. What it is it's the mental discomfort of reality not matching your expectation. And what we try to do in the cognitive dissonance area of our life is we don't grieve it. So that's not cognitive dissonance. It's us trying to deal with it. We're trying to do something about it, to fix the gap, fill the gap, make the gap go away. So people will fight it, they'll resist it, they'll argue with it, they will reason with it. What happens with that is instead of saying, you know what, life is not what I thought, let me go through the grief process. Like, no, I'm going to wrestle this out. I'm going to make this work. I'm going to try and find a way to make it make sense, or I'm going to bend the will of everything outside of, my actual control to make this work. I'm going to force things to happen. The next step after that is another layer of this cognitive dissonance. And that's where confirmation bias steps in. And what this is that your brain starts helping build the story. So when you can't force the gap to go away, when you can't force the situation to fix itself and you don't understand it, why did it not play out the way that I wanted to? Why is life not what I want it to be? Now we're going to move into the confirmation bias, where our brain is starting to figure out the reasons why to help soothe the emotional discomfort. So there's a psychological principle called confirmation bias, and it's once you believe something like nothing works out for me, your brain begins collecting evidence. And so when we're in that situation where there's dissonance and we don't understand it, we will try to find a reason why it is the way that it is. And when it doesn't go the way that we want, we'll jump into that, well, I guess there's something I did. I guess there's something wrong with me, pit, as we talked about in the beginning of the episode. And so once we buy in and we jump into the pit, and we're in the depths of despair, now we're going to try and find the reasons to prove what we believe. It's confirmation bias. So if you say, well, nothing ever works out for me, now your brain is going to start collecting evidence, and it's going to notice the failures. It's going to notice the delays. It's going to notice the rejection, but it'll ignore the progress and the growth and the small wins. So your brain is literally going to sink its teeth and latch onto everything that proves what you've decided to buy into in order to rectify what you don't understand. The disappointment, the delay, the expectation not playing out the way that you want because you didn't want to grieve it, you wanted to fight it. You wanted to try to make it work because it's frustrating. The expectation was beautiful. The dream was beautiful. The plan was great. Had it not just gone the way that I said it was going to go, that I wish it would have gone. If I could have controlled it, it would have been perfect. I get it, guys. I am a type A Enneagram 3. I love a plan. And I think my plans are great. I tell my husband all the time that I tend to be right about a lot of things. If not, I'm right all of the time. And that amount of he's going to love that I'm saying this. That amount of ego and pride can be your downfall in this situation where you say, well, my dreams were beautiful. My plan was great. And if it would just go the way that I say it should go, then life would be perfect. And so when things don't play out, because we can't control other people, we can't control how the world works, what happens to the economy, the housing market, any market, there's plenty of things that I'm dealing with personally right now that I can't control. And so when I reach that threshold of well, now's, that time of year, or now is that time in my life where I said that I would check this box off and I can't. I don't have the means to do it, or I don't have the external buy-in, or I don't have the way to make that happen. It is much easier to just get angry and want to fight it rather than going through the grief process of the fact that it didn't work out. And sometimes there's just not anything that you can do to force your dreams or your expectations or the plans. And so that's how all of this happens, where we enter into this cognitive dissonance and we're trying to figure out what's going on. And then we enter into the confirmation bias and we're proving to ourselves that somehow we deserve for this to happen because something is individually wrong with us, and life actually does pick favorites, and some people actually do have a leg up, and there's nothing that we can do about it. And so we're just screwed. Underneath all of that is something that is much deeper and more sinister. And it is that at this point, when you reach this part where you've bought into the confirmation bias, you are no longer experiencing your life. You're experiencing the interpretation of your life. It's the same situation that maybe, quite frankly, somebody else is also dealing with, but a different meaning. And it's a completely different emotional reality. When I was preparing for this episode, I thought about Shakespeare. I thought about really famous plays, the tragedies. I thought about all of these plays that Shakespeare wrote, all these famous poets that wrote these tragedies where you have the protagonist that faces so much adversity that you are rooting for them the whole time, but their fate, is determined. Like, the play is already written and there's nothing that you can do about it. Honestly, I'm going to be real controversial for some of these like Gen Xers that listen to this podcast, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that episode 3 of Star Wars, where Anakin turns into Darth Vader, is a tragedy. It is such a tragedy. And I watch that movie all of the time, hoping that somehow Anakin won't fall to the dark side, but there's nothing you can do about it. It's written that he will fall. It's part of the prophecy. And it's part of his redemption arc that happens later in episode 7. There would be no redemption if there had been no fall. And that's a whole other thing. But I think that it is really interesting when you think about this from the lens of theater or entertainment, movies, all that stuff, where it's predetermined. You're watching it and you're rooting for the protagonist, which in tragedies, you have your tragic hero. That is your protagonist. And they say tragic hero because the hero is who you root for, but their fate is sealed. They won't succeed. That's how I feel when I watch Anakin turn to the dark side every time. Like, no, just believe that there's something good. Like, believe that you can overcome, like, believe better, but they never do. And I was thinking about that in parallel to how there are people, and I will put myself in this category because I do this a lot, where they view their life like a play, where they are the main character of their own life. And it's really interesting when you think about it from this lens, because there is a trap of how we process our emotions when we start to just be the main character in our life. We are the only person in our life. We're the only tragic hero. We are the only person with adversity, because for the most part, when you watch tragedies, when you watch plays, you have the main character. That's the one that you buy into. That's the one that you resonate with. That's the one that you root for. No one gives a crap about the side characters. Whatever happens to them happens, but we're rooting for the main character, the hero over here. And so a lot of us, when we are in this place of struggling with trauma and struggling with disappointments and, delays and frustration, we'll fall into this thing where like we almost put blinders on, and the only person that we see is ourselves. And it's called the main character trap. And I've done it. It's like when I'm frustrated, when I'm emotional, when I'm grieving, when I'm disappointed, I can't see anybody else's struggles. I only see my own. And this only reinforces that confirmation bias even further of the whole, well, maybe my life is just the one that sucks and everybody else has it easier, because we collect more evidence to confirm that confirmation, to confirm that bias of, why did this happen? Why is it unfair? How nobody understands you? Because we need to validate the fact that not only is our life really hard and unfair, but nobody else is experiencing any sort of loss or hardship at all. Nope, you the only one. Guys, I've done it. I really have done it. It's extremely harmful. It is a horrible trap to fall into when we believe that we're the main character of this tragedy that we're experiencing. And we fall into other things, where we're confirming why this only happens to us. We are the only people in the whole world. It's just me. Oh, this only happens to me. And then nobody understands me. What a load of bullshit. It's a bunch of crap. Slowly, without realizing it, we stop trying to understand our lives and we start trying to prove our suffering. There's no learning in this process anymore. At this stage, where we are the tragic hero of our own life, there's no, well, what can I learn from this? What can I gain from this? It's like, nope. I'm just suffering and I need everybody to know it. I'm going to tweet about it. I'm going to post on Facebook about it. I'm going to post all my stories about it. I'm going to journal about it all the time. I'm going to text everybody that will listen about it, because they need to know it. I need to prove to the whole world that my life is just too damn hard. And the hard truth of all of this, and I've had to learn this, is the longer that you identify with suffering, the harder it becomes to leave it. You guys know that I don't talk to you about anything that I haven't personally gone through, because I am just not that arrogant to believe that I have all of the answers to the mysteries of the universe. So I only talk to you about the things that I've experienced, because I know, hey, at least I have the backing of like, I went through this, to at least offer some perspective. So I say all of what I'm about to say with that in context. When you identify with suffering, and if you are listening and you are doing this, when you identify with suffering and then you only prove it, you reinforce it, you become a miserable person to be around. And I know that that is probably really tough to hear because you're already hurting, and I get it. However, for me, for somebody like me that is in the middle of struggle, I can still somewhat find it within myself to be weary of what other people are dealing with and going through. That wakes me up. That gives me a little bit of, not inspiration, but motivation to like, okay, let me pause for a second, pause on my crying, pause on my throwing temper tantrums and pity parties long enough to like look around and see if anybody else is struggling, to just like come out of this pit that I've dug. Because I don't want to be a miserable person for somebody else to be around, because all that that's going to do is chase them away. And then I'm going to lose the friends that I have in my pity party. You know, the whole saying, misery loves company. Nobody's going to want to be around me. I ain't going to have no company for my misery. If you are perpetuating suffering in your mind and you're buying into this, like, you are becoming a miserable person to be around. And if you've been asking yourself, or if you've noticed it all, like, hey, people have stopped reaching out. People have stopped texting me. They've cut, their times spent with me short or whatever. Like, look inwards. I say all of that as your big sister because I love you and I've done it. My poor husband has been like, I love you, but I just can't listen to this right now. And I have to stomach that, because I don't think it's fair for me to like vomit all of my misery onto him and then force him to be subjected to it if it's not something that he wants to be subjected to. He has every right to say, I don't enjoy this. Let's go further into all of this. There's something that I feel like is not spoken enough about. And it's that your brain is not designed to make you happy. It's designed to keep you safe. And in a previous episode, we did talk about this at length. Actually, the previous episode that is on my channel, I spoke with a somatic life coach, and her depth of knowledge of your nervous system was beautiful. So if you haven't listened to that episode, please go listen to it. It's so insightful about how sometimes we choose chaos because we know it, because we understand it, because we're familiar with it. And in a way, that's our brain choosing safety rather than a potential unknown that could be much better, much safer for us. But because we don't know what it is, we'll choose the chaos. We'll choose the trauma. So understand that your brain will always choose the known, because it determines that as safe, because it's predictable. Safe often means familiar, predictable, and known. Even if what's familiar is anxiety, disappointment, emotional chaos, self-doubt, and hopelessness. So that's why change, when you have the opportunity to choose something different, to go a different way, to talk to a different person, to look at it a different direction or from a different perspective, change feels uncomfortable. That's why healing feels uncomfortable, and that's why hope can feel uncomfortable. Because your brain isn't asking what's good for me. Your brain is asking, have I survived this before? Do I know this? Have I walked this road? And if the answer to that is no, then your brain is not going to want to do that. We've talked at length in previous episodes about neuro pathways, and that is the psychological term of the route that your brain is familiar with, because it has traveled from point A to point B, thoughts that lead to behaviors, that lead to patterns, that lead to character. Your brain has traveled from point A to point B when it's presented with one adversity or stimulus and then it jumps to this conclusion, it has traveled that path so often that that neural pathway is like a divot in the road. Like if you picture like a hiking trail, you look at the regular grass and you look at the trail, and the trail is the one that is carved into the grass. That's why it's dirt and it's no longer grass anymore. That's a good visual of a neural pathway, and that is how your brain operates. Your brain is going to say, have I traveled this way before? Is this my normal way of thinking? And if the answer is no, your brain's going to be like, no, I'm going to go the way that I always go, because it's easier, because it's known, because it's safer. And you need to understand, if you're here, that's why a lot of people get stuck and they stay here for their whole life, and they're miserable people. They get stuck and they stay here a lot longer than they want to, or they're stuck there until they die. Because familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar possibility. If you have found yourself building a case against your own life, here are 10 brutally honest reasons your life feels worse than it actually is. Number 1, you've made your feelings your facts. And have I done this before? Absolutely. Will I do it again? Probably. Because it's my default. I think a lot of us have this issue. A lot of us have this thing where it's like we're presented with stimulus and disappointment and frustration. We're like, must be true. Because it's frustrating, because I'm feeling feelings in my body. It must be true. Listen, I do it. We all do it. I think we all need to learn to outthink our feelings. We need to be able to look at our feelings as a tool, but not as the definition of stuff. Our emotions can be indicators. It can be a clue, but we need to dissect them. We need to look deeper. What does it mean when I'm feeling this way? What are my emotions trying to tell me? What is my nervous system experiencing? But a lot of us literally just ride the wave of our emotions. We do nothing about it. We think nothing about it. We don't dissect it. We don't look deeper because it's hard. It's so time consuming, and it takes a lot of work and self-awareness for us to pause in the heat of anger, or pause in the heat of depression or anxiety or whatever, and ask, what does this mean? And think through it. Reason our emotions back into reality. But that's just not easy. Quite frankly, a lot of people just don't either want to do the work or they don't have the tools necessary, but that's why you're listening to this podcast. So you need to know, just because you feel hopeless doesn't mean things are hopeless. Just because you feel stuck doesn't mean you are stuck. Just because you feel forgotten doesn't mean you are forgotten. Feelings are real and they are clues and tools, but they are not always accurate. So that's what I mean by like facts versus feelings. So you may be feeling something and it may feel very strong. And you may say to yourself, I don't know why I'm feeling this so strongly if it's not true. But you have to do the work to get from this very strong emotion that your body is processing and experiencing, and it's happening. Like, I'm not going to take that from you, into facts. What does this say about you? Just because you're angry doesn't mean you're an angry person. That would be silly. But are you feeling anger? Yeah. Why? I'm disappointed. And this goes into a whole episode, and I feel like I need to do an episode about primary versus secondary emotions, because a lot of people are very good at identifying secondary emotions. Anger, frustration, sadness, all of the things that kind of like bubble to the surface that we demonstrate. But the primary emotions are the things that are underneath. So when a lot of people are angry, what's actually happening is that they are embarrassed. Maybe they're insecure, maybe they're hurt. But when the primary emotion gets dismissed, and a lot of it has to do with how we're raised, if the primary emotion gets dismissed, then we move to secondary emotions. And secondary emotions are a way of defense. It's how we put up walls and we keep people at a distance so that they don't come into the primary emotions, because the primary emotions are where the actual root in the hurt is. So going back to reasoning with your emotions, you have to do the work to figure out what are your emotions telling you and what are the facts about the situation, because you're feeling something about a situation, but it doesn't say anything about you. We can't tie our identity to what we feel. But a lot of people do that. So that's reason number one. Reason number two, you believe your hardship is unique. I've done it. And I say this on the podcast all the time. The things that you face and deal with are not unique to you. Why do I say that? Why don't you just go ahead and answer that question right now? Why do you think I say that all the time on this podcast? Because it's so easy to believe that it is in order to reinforce suffering and reinforce misery. And from suffering and misery, you can't grow. You'll just dig your little hole and believe that the world is supposed to cater to you, come knock on your door, fix your problems, and there's nothing that's going to come from that. And quite frankly, no one is coming to save you. So that's why I say your hardship is not unique to you. Life does not pick favorites. We all have things that suck that we deal with in life. Some of us may have very similar, if not the same, hardships. But when we believe our hardship is unique to us, we take that from somebody else and say, no, it's just me. I'm the only one here on planet Mother effing Earth that has faced this. What an absolute ignorant and asinine thing to say. And it's honestly very selfish because your world closes in and you think that you're the only person that has to deal with heartache and pain and disappointment. And no, we all do. Does that mean that you no longer get to have your feelings of disappointment and frustration? No. But it also allows you to have a little bit more grace for yourself and to also see that the world as a whole has things that we're all facing and that we can all equally walk each other into better. We can all walk parallel paths of hardship and obstacles, but we can also walk parallel paths into growth. It's a much better way of looking at life. But instead, when we believe that our hardship is unique to us, we allow the pain to isolate us. And then it whispers, nobody understands. Nobody gets me. How the hell is that supposed to help you? I mean, honestly, like I say this with so much fervor, but I have done this to myself. And then I get through the process and I'm like, you stupid. Because it helps nothing and nobody to believe that it's just me. Nobody sees me because nobody gets me. They don't understand me. So anyway, you need to know the details of your situation may be unique. You know, maybe it played out. You were walking on this specific trail and you saw this specific rock that nobody else has seen. And it was this time of day and you were this age and nobody else has experienced it at that level of detail. Sure, I'll give you that. The details of your situation may be unique, but the experience and the principle are not. It's just, there's no way in like however long the earth has existed and humanity has been a thing, there's absolutely no way that you are the only person that has felt this way and dealt with some kind of hardship that's similar to somebody else, either the current 8 billion people that are living or the previous generations. I don't even know how many humans have been alive at this point. I should look that up, but there's no way. No way. I'm sorry. I'm going to poo-poo on that one for you. So stop. Just stop it. You're not helping yourself. You think that you are by reinforcing that. But all you're doing is you're digging the hole of the pit of despair deeper. And nobody, because you believe your situation is unique to you and your hardship is unique to you, nobody can get in there with you. And then you say, well, nobody sees me. Well, you're not allowing anybody to see you because you believe that this is just yours. I'm sorry, but like you're doing it to yourself. Number 3. You allow comparison to rule you. I remember when I was about 13 years old, I struggled with comparison a lot because of some situations that I grew up in very young where I was bullied. I never really had a comparison problem until I was bullied, and I was bullied very young. It started in family and then it moved into school. Bullied for stupid things, bullied for my voice, my face, my body, the things that I liked to do, bullied for the amount of siblings that I had or how I went to church all the time. It was so stupid. Like, why can't we all just live our lives, guys? But anyway, I never really had a comparison problem until this issue in my life started surfacing and I was getting bullied. And I was like, well, I never really noticed that about myself. And so by the time that I had reached my preteens and my early teens, I had a significant comparison problem, like bad. And I remember I came across on Pinterest a quote that said that comparison is the thief of joy. And it just resonated with me. It stuck with me. I think about that, quote all of the time. I have no idea who it's from. Sorry to not give them credit. But I think about that quote all of the time when I'm feeling like I'm entering into a rut where I'm like, oh, I just wish that I could have what they have. Or I just wish that my life could look like theirs or whatever. And it just pops right up because I'm feeling the manifestations of what comparison does in my body. I'm feeling that frustration. I'm feeling that angst and that envy kind of bubble up in me. I'm comparing. That's why I don't feel joy right now. And it's true. It's so true because then I just set my focus on what they have in their life and how it's so much better than mine. And there's nothing good that can come from that practice of just constantly comparing because I want what they have, or I think that they're better than me or whatever. Because all that it does is it diminishes who I am and the life that I have. And it diminishes my experiences and the things that I've grown from and all of the beauty of who I am and what I have experienced and overcome and done. It diminishes that. So it makes me feel like crap. I think that's really why comparison is the thief of joy, because it just makes the person who is doing the comparison feel like shit. There's no joy that can come from feeling like a bunch of shit. So, sorry, Mom. So what you do in comparison is you compare your reality to someone else's highlight reel, because that's really what it is. I remember I went to a conference when I was in my teens as well, and they were talking about how social media is everybody's highlight reel, and there was like this whole analogy of like comparison. And it's true, because what I choose to compare myself to in somebody else's life, I have no clue the backstory. I have no clue the conversations that are taking place behind closed doors. I have no clue of the fights, of the arguments, of the grit, of, the hardship that took place to get them where they are. And if I knew that while I was comparing, would I actually want what they have? Because when you compare, you're not comparing to the whole scope of everything, of their entire reality. We're just comparing to this one tiny little sliver. But then we compare that greatness to the full scope of what we know about our life. Because we know our backstory, we know our behind the scenes, and it's ugly. But you don't think that everybody else's behind the scenes is just as ugly? Oh, I'm tickling myself. Oh, man. So in comparison, you see their wins and their stability, their relationships, their success, their money, whatever. But you didn't see their breakdowns, their insecurity, their hidden battles. And so that is just the reality of there is nothing good that can come from comparison because it's not rooted in the full truth. It's not rooted in the fullness of their reality versus your reality. And I think if we knew the fullness, we wouldn't compare. And so you have to be wary of that. If you're a comparing type person, but you're only comparing to a tiny little portion of their life, you should stop. Just stop doing that because it's not real. You're not comparing to anything real. Number 4, you've never finished a grief cycle. This is so true and it's so accurate. I actually watched a podcast episode where my own mom, shout out, Amy Ashcraft, she talked about how she had never finished a grief cycle and she was dealing with a myriad of hardships and emotional pain. And I was listening to it and I was like, man, that's so good. And it's so true. When we don't finish a grief cycle, your nervous system, number one, if we're just going straight to the nervous system, there is no end to all of this emotional roller coastering. You just you're stopping in the middle of all of these ups and downs, but there's no finish. There's no purpose. There's no learning. There's no understanding of what all it was for. It's just in the middle of stuff. And it's in the middle of a high or a low or a twist and turn. And that's a lot of emotional turmoil to just have in your system. So for people who feel like their life is stuck and it feels like their life sucks, but maybe these other previous points are not resonating, maybe it's not that you're stuck per se. It's not that you're believing these certain things about yourself or you're comparing or doing these other things. It may be that you've had a couple things happen and you've never really grieved it. And what do I mean by grief? They have the whole, the 5 steps of grief, which grief is not linear. And we all know that. You may do these things in order or out of order. And you may get to a part where you feel like you have finished grieving. And then lo and behold, something else happens and you're like, crap, now I'm back to being angry, or now I'm back to bargaining, or now I'm back to, whatever. So it is very important to take inventory. And when I say take inventory, stop and look inwards. So it's very important for you to take inventory of where you are at emotionally in your process of life, in your disappointment, in your delays, in things that haven't exactly gone to plan. And ask yourself, am I in a stage of disbelief or shock or anger or bargaining, or have I really accepted this? Have I really moved on? Or is it every single time that I pull up my social media feed and I see that somebody else hasn't lost that loved one, but I have, I get angry again? Have you really finished the grief cycle? And nobody else can do this for you but you. You have to finish this cycle. You have to walk through the stages of grief. And understand that grief is not just loss. We talked about this in the previous episode when we were talking about grieving things that live. It's not just when somebody dies. Grief is relationships. You break up, or you are no longer friends with that person, or you have a betrayal, or you get fired from a job, or you have a loss of your identity, or it's dreams or expectations. All of this stuff will have grief tied to it. And so if you find yourself here in this, where you're stuck in a grief cycle, go back and listen to my previous episode where we talk about grieving things that are alive, and see if there is any sort of pointers on that to help you get past this, because it's very important to be able to get out of this thing that's keeping you in a state of misery. Number 5, you've made suffering part of your identity. And we've kind of already addressed this in the beginning of the episode, but it's important enough for us to talk about it as one of these reasons. So we're going to sit here for a minute and discuss it. If this is what you're doing, if you're identifying with suffering, that many people, and when I say many people, I do not have to look that hard or very long to find somebody who has chosen to make suffering their identity. People get stuck here for a very long time, and they're very vocal about it because the struggle of their life becomes who they are. And it's not just the matter of I identify with suffering. So I am suffering. My life is just a multitude of hardships and suffering and all this stuff. When people identify with it, they have to prove it to the world around them. And so I've already said this, but I'll say it again. If you identify with suffering, the next step is that you tell other people that you are suffering, that your life is just a myriad of different kinds of sufferings, and that it's only you, and you have to shout it from the rooftops, and you have to summit the mountain and shout it from there, and everybody has to know, and everybody has to know why, and somehow, oh, well, it was this particular thing that happened, and it just culminated into a bunch of different things that led to your whole entire life just being super hard and difficult, and everybody should just cater to you because it's just you. You are suffering. Your identity is suffering. And it does nothing but drive people away, because I don't want to identify with suffering. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to become that. I don't like how it makes me feel when somebody decides to tell me their life story and it's literally just blanketed in there's nothing that you can do to change it because it's just who I am. What do you do with identifying with suffering? Nothing. If you believe that about yourself. There's nothing that I can do to fix it. But people who believe that they are suffering believe that the world should fix it, but they can't. Nobody can change how you think. Nobody can change how you identify. Nobody can change how you define yourself if you've chosen to define yourself by suffering. It is literally the most vicious cycle. There's nothing to be done. On one hand, you say, my life sucks and I am just suffering and it's just me, and you have to prove it to the world. But why are you proving it to the world? It's because you want something to change. But then because you think that it's your identity, there's nothing about your external circumstances that can disprove it, because it's what you've believed. You've bought into that. So then you're just miserable. You're mad that nothing's changing, but then you're mad because nobody's doing anything, or you're mad that it's who you are. And it's like, I don't know what to do with that. You have to believe differently. That is the only solution. It's the only thing that allows different stimulus in. It's the only thing that allows a different definition in, is if you believe differently. I don't like this one. I know it's very obvious, because when you believe that your identity is suffering, everything begins reinforcing that identity. And the only thing that can come from that is just more suffering. I said it in another episode, you are what you think. So if you think that you are suffering, then you will suffer for as long as you think that you're suffering. So the longer that you identify with suffering, the harder it becomes to leave it. Because that's it. It just repeats and it culminates. And it's like, it becomes like the giant snowball tumbling down the mountain that's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, but the mountain never ends. And so it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And you're going to drive people away from you, because nobody wants to be around a very angry person that believes that there's nothing that can change about their life, because there's nothing that can change about the way that they perceive themselves. And so there's nothing that we can do to fix said life. And so it just, stop. You're not suffering. Your life may be hard. There may be a lot of things that you're dealing with that are really frustrating. There may be a lot of things that you're dealing with that may have broken your heart and shattered you into pieces. And trust me when I say that you're not alone, because I've done it too. I've been there. I have been at my breaking point where I'm like, you know what? It's either this changes or I take myself out. I am not joking. And to say that only one person in your worldview, which is you, gets to hold the trophy of most suffering and most worthy of everybody bowing down and acknowledging that your life is harder than theirs, is the biggest load of crap, and it is the most selfish thing ever. But there's nobody that can change that for you but you. And so all you're going to do is you're going to walk around wearing your badge of honor of being the most suffering person in the world, which is not true. Literally thinking of Kim Kardashian losing her diamond earring in the pool, and her sister, like, there are people dying in Africa, Kim. Like, I am not joking. Your life could be worse. I just feel like with this particular point, I have to shake people awake. There is no way to change your life until you change how you think about yourself. None. It could be worse. My life, when I was at my point of wanting to literally not even be alive anymore, could have been worse. But I literally did not believe that, because I believed I was already at the lowest point, and I wasn't. It was just about how I thought about myself. That was it. And so I really want to caution you, if you are sitting here believing that it's you and you alone that has the life of suffering because you are a suffering person, there is nowhere to go but down. And nobody else can come with you, even though you probably want them to so they can fix your situation. No one can come with you. You're on your own. Note that I say all of that in love. Number 6, you try to control things that you can't. There's definitely a double side to this, and we're going to address it. So let's start with the things you cannot control. I've been here. I want to do it all the time. And what do I say in all of our podcasts? We cannot control other people. And there's actually quite a lot that we cannot control. Outside of people, I can't control the weather. I can't control the economy. I can't control how things play out in my life a lot of times. I can't control a lot of stuff. I can't control the seasons, although I would like to. because I do not like winter. There is a lot that we cannot control, but a lot of people somehow get it in their brain that if I just try hard enough, if I have a convincing argument enough, if I, willpower it into existence, I can pull the strings of some imaginary thing outside of myself and control it. But we can't. And so all that does is it leads to deeper frustration because you're fighting an imaginary thing that isn't there that you can't control. And so it just leads to further disappointment. You set yourself up for failure because you expect that if you try hard enough, or if you pursue hard enough, or if you work hard enough, and sometimes there are things that you can control by that action, by those actions. But there are quite a few things, and you know what I'm talking about in regards to your situation. There are quite a few things that we can't, no matter how much effort or energy or thoughts or prayers, for all you church people trying to pray other people into doing stuff they don't want to do, that you can't make happen. And so all that it does is it sets you up for failure. You get disappointed, and then you have to grieve this stuff. Then you get frustrated because maybe you don't want to grieve it because you believe that you can still control it, that you still can control it. So there is no grief that happens. So then you just become, led by frustration and anger, and then this whole thing happens. So understand, timing, people, outcomes, the future, and everything else that I named, you can't control it. So let go. I'm not even joking. There is nothing else that you can do other than take a deep breath and let it go. There's nothing that you can do. But that's also a very freeing thing to be able to say, you know what? There's nothing I can do. I don't need to try that hard. I don't need to pursue that hard. I can take this burden off of myself, that I was running that hard after this particular deadline, and there's nothing that I can do. So I'm going to not do all of that with my energy, and I'm going to reallocate that towards other things. I'm going to let go. Moving on. Number 7, this is the reverse of the previous point. You don't take ownership of what you can control. What I have discovered as I've been talking with people recently, and then also just learning more about myself, which happens all the time, is that a lot of people want to do the reverse. They want to take ownership of what they can't control, and they want to dismiss what they can. It's like, you know what? Could I control how I responded to that person? Nah. I am, however, going to try and control how you talk to me. And that is not how this gets to work. That is not healthy. And that's not even how reality exists. Okay? We have to do the actual healthy thing, which is to let go of what we can't control and take ownership of what we can control. And I'm going to be real frank here. And I know it's not going to shock you because I've said it before. The only thing we can control is this person. That's it. Everything going on in our mind, in our hearts, in our body, and what we do with said body, said person, said thoughts, said heart. That's it. That's all you got. That's what you can control. Is that glamorous? Nope. Is that fun sometimes? Nope. Is that a gut punch at times? Yep. But that's all we got. And understand, ownership is not blame. When we take ownership, we take our power back and we say, you know what? I could do differently. I could go back to school. I could have said things differently. I'm going to choose to do differently. I could get up earlier. I could go to the gym. When we do that, you understand how empowering that is. When we start thinking about all the things we can do with ourselves to change the circumstances, to change the things that we're frustrated about. There is things we can do within our own control. And when we start taking ownership and when we start thinking about the things that we can do, it's very empowering. If you don't like your job, if you don't like how you look, if you're feeling a little bit overweight, if you don't like your situation, if you're feeling lonely, guys, there's a lot that can be done. When we don't buy into the hopelessness, when we don't try and control other people, when we look inward and say, am I identifying with suffering? Should I change that? Can I control that? Yes. Can I take ownership for how I think about myself, how I talk to myself? Can I take ownership of my inner dialogue? All of this stuff is so important. And when you start thinking about it and taking ownership, it's very empowering. And it opens the doors of opportunity more than trying to control everything else and everyone else and identifying with suffering and all of this other stuff. Some things do happen to us, and a lot of times we can't control that. I feel like, because of that reality, trauma has become such a buzzword where we say, oh, well, I'm traumatized from this thing in my life, and so therefore I can't. And like I said, nobody can change how you view your situation. You may see your particular details as unique to you, but I would venture to guess that quite a few other people have dealt with similar things and chosen to view it differently. So I say all of that with a spoonful of sugar, as Mary Poppins says. We have all had stuff happen to us, and it's probably not beautiful, and it's ugly, and it's harmful. And yes, we've all had trauma, and we've had disappointments, but how we respond to said things happening to us outside of our control. If somebody has hurt you, if somebody's betrayed you, if somebody broke your heart, if somebody disappointed you, whatever, fill in the blank, we can't control that. But what we can do and what we can control is how we're going to respond, what we're going to do with that. Who are we going to become? What are we going to do on the back end of that disappointment? How are we going to rework how we see ourselves? Are we going to let this identify us? Is this going to be another label that we allow to determine our self-worth or not? The choice to what happens to us is ours. No one's coming to save you. I've said this before. And that's not a threat. It is freedom. It's giving you the keys. You can drive the car. You can be in the driver's seat. You can determine where we go. I can't do it for you. And quite frankly, I'm not going to, because I have my own things I'm trying to do. I have my own life I'm trying to live. I have my own things I'm trying to build. Can I come alongside you at times? Yes. Can I be there all the time? No. But that is the beauty of your life being yours to live. Okay, number 8. You forgot to be grateful. Oh, this one is going to really irk some people who are not having a good day today. But I will say, I have had this conversation recently quite a few times. I literally had it yesterday. Gratitude is so incredible. You want to talk about feeling like having a complete change in your demeanor, having a complete change in what your nervous system feels, and having a complete change in your perspective. Be grateful. I feel like a lot of people will push back and say, oh, well, if I'm grateful, then I deny the hardship. No, not at all. Not at all. I think gratitude can literally be something as effective as, man, that was so difficult and it was so hard and it was so challenging and heartbreaking. But I am so grateful for the people who came alongside me, who called me, who texted me, who told me that I was worthy. Do you see how that flips the ugly on its head and turns it into beauty? And if you're a person of faith, if you read the Bible at all, there's a scripture that talks about how beauty comes from ashes. And I think that this is what gratitude is. Honestly, I feel like this is the beauty of the tool of gratitude and how it literally will take ashes and bring beauty from them. Because ashes are death. It's that loss. It's that disappointment. It is that heartache and that pain and that ugly and, whatever it is that you're facing. And then what gratitude does is it takes the ashes and it makes something beautiful with them. But you have to exercise it. All it is it is a perspective correction. But I do think there's something spiritual. Personally, I'm just going to speak for myself. I think there's something very spiritual tied to gratitude that does something inside of your body and your nervous system when you practice it. And it's not easy when you're in the thick of disappointment, when you're in the thick of the heartache and the struggle. It is very hard to want to be grateful. And I've been here before where I knew, I'm miserable, I'm suffering, and I'm going through it. And I'm feeling that, tap on my shoulder and that knock at my heart to just find something to be grateful for. And I was talking with a friend of mine yesterday about how the way that I see gratitude is it's an anchor. So imagine that you are riding, the waves of life. You're in the ocean and you're in the storm. So there's all of this failure and disappointment and delays and frustration, and life is just a mess, and you're a mess, and it's suffering and nobody understands you. And so you're in this. There's thunder and lightning and the waves are rising and it's rocking your boat and you're going to capsize and everything's going to happen, and it feels so overwhelming. But what I feel like in that moment, in the middle of all of that chaos, when I find one thing to be grateful for, it anchors my boat. And the waves may come and the circumstances may not change. The storm may be what it is, but I know that I will get through this. And sure, some naval person may be like, that's not how this works. You don't put an anchor down in a wave. I don't know, okay? But I'm just saying, like, metaphorically, like, I'm not being tossed around by every wave. I'm able to ride it, and I know I'm going to be fine. So I was saying this to her. I felt it like well up in me. And I said, there have been times in my life where I felt almost unable to look past my particular circumstance and find something to be grateful for in that. And so I looked for the tiniest little thing that I could be grateful for. And I've spoken about some times of hardship on this podcast. And so there was a time last year, we've talked about it, where I was just so depressed. And I was dealing with a couple different things, coming at me all at once. And it was so hard to look past it. I was identifying with my suffering. I was crying all the time. It was so miserable to be around. And I went outside, and I have, a couple different flowers that the landscapers at my house planted before we started renting this home. And my garden hadn't bloomed yet. And so I went outside and I saw my first flower in my garden. And I had gratitude swell up in me. I didn't even vocalize it, but it was there. And I could burst into tears now. I burst into tears then. And it changed the game for me. Just seeing a flower, that was it. Because I love flowers so much. I love spring. Spring is, my favorite season because it symbolizes newness, but it symbolizes, the burst of life that comes from what looks like death, where all of this color just explodes. And I look forward to it so much. And so in the middle of this time where I felt like I was dead inside and my life was over and all of this stuff, I see this flower and I knew what it meant for me. I knew what it symbolized for me, that I wasn't forgotten, that my life wasn't over, that if this flower had come back from a season of being, asleep or whatever for the winter season, and here it is, and I know how much it means to me to see it. I just had that gratitude come over me, and it changed my entire perspective about that time in my life. And it gave me hope again. It was just that one little thing. And then I started, every day after that. When I say I was in the depths of despair, this was the time in my life. It was one of the times in my life where I was dealing very much with depression to the point of ending it, as I mentioned earlier. And so I knew that it was imperative that I find it within myself to be grateful for something. Maybe I didn't want to acknowledge, the situation that I was dealing with, and that was fine. That was where I was at in that moment in my life. But I could be grateful for something. And so I started with the flowers. And I remember I journaled it down and I started crying again because of how much it meant to me. And then, then I said, I'm grateful for the blue sky and a sunny day and the green grass. And I just started going down the list. And before I knew it, it was like I could find so many things to be grateful for. So many. It was as if like I just threw open the door of gratitude, and the scales on my eyes that were clouding my judgment and keeping me from being able to see all of the beautiful things in my life. And I could only see the hardship. They fell off, and I could see all of the beauty, even in my own situation. I could see the beauty in it. And it gave me the ability to hope and to believe in myself and to change my entire situation to the point of completely doing a 180. In hindsight, thinking about who I was then and who I've become now, that all started because I was grateful. Really. That was the foundation that I laid, was being grateful. If that's you and life has, dealt you a set of cards that have been really challenging and difficult, I'm sure that it has been, and I won't take that from you. But if you can find it within yourself to be grateful, even for one thing, just the air that you're breathing today, the fact that you woke up, that you got to have another day. If you can be grateful for something as silly as, your favorite flower is in bloom or the sky is blue, just like me, I promise you it will change everything for you. It will change the game. Let me try not to cry the rest of the episode. All right, number 9. You've confused a hard season with a hard life. And this goes back to the beginning of the episode where adversity comes, and it comes maybe a couple of things at a time, and then another thing happens, and we start to identify that it's not just a season, it's not just a situation, it's not just a hard time, it's a hard life. We identify and say, well, it's just my life. We've already talked at length about it, that it is dangerous because it leads to identity of suffering. But understand that everybody has seasons. Even in marriage, like I've been married, my husband and I will have been married this June for 5 years. And literally like the seasons of the year, every season that we've experienced in every year together has been completely different. And at times there's been a couple months of hardship where it seems as though like things are not the way that they were right after we got married. I was never a believer of like, oh, the honeymoon phase will never end. I was not like that. But there were times where I was surprised by the hardship of our marriage, where I was like, ooh, I knew that I like this. And then I started to believe like, is this going to be how our entire marriage is? Because I don't like that. But it's not, like sometimes winter sucks. I don't like winter. Sometimes people don't like summer. It can be a hard season. It's not a hard life. And things in different times in our life, things will be more difficult than other times. It's there's good times and bad. And in my wedding vows to my husband, I said, I would love you in good times and bad. But how do you know good times if you don't have bad times? And I think that's a beautiful perspective to have. Like, sure, it may be a really, really tough time for you right now. Money might be tight. Things just might be emotionally challenging. You might not have had any luck in the dating game and you thought by now you'd be married. Or if you were like me, like I'm turning 30 and I still don't own a home and I'm kind of wrestling with how do I feel about that? It may be a tough time, but it's not a tough life. And if we don't have bad times, how do we know that we're in the good times? And that may be really sucky to hear if you're in a bad time. I've been there. I've been in a bad time. I don't like it. I would love very much to get rid of it. But there's so much value in the highs and lows of life because there's so much that we learn and there's so much that we can appreciate. And there's things in the lows that we didn't realize we were taking for granted in the highs. There's beauty in the low. There's beauty in the valley. There's beauty in the hardship of, when you're really in the thick of something and you're wrestling stuff out. Like if I'm having a hard time with my husband, or if I'm having a hard time at work, or I'm having a hard time with other things, I get to look back and say, wow, there's stuff that I took for granted. And I'm going to make a mental note that when I get through this, I'm not going to take that for granted anymore. And matter of fact, I have been very diligent to do that in certain aspects of my life where I realized, I wasn't intentional. I was not vocal about stuff. I did not communicate gratitude. I did not thank people enough because when I went through the hard times and I saw that the good times had, things that I was taking for granted, I knew that I should make it a point. Once I get out of this, once I grieve it, once I mourn whatever it is I'm dealing with and I get through this, I need to be grateful. I need to express thankfulness and gratitude or whatever, don't take it for granted. There's so much in both that makes life a whole rather than two halves. If all we ever have is good times, it's so easy to take things for granted. It's so easy to not really even see the beauty in anything, because it is a skill to learn to see all of those stuff. And that's a part of life. Life is not perfect. That's what makes it wonderful. That's what makes it beautiful, is all of the things that we learn and experience from the hard times. And so confusing a hard season with a hard life does not just you, but your life a disservice. When you believe that this is just what life is going to be, because it's just your life is unique to you and it's only ever going to be hard, you buy into the reality that nothing good can ever come from your hardship, and you can never learn anything good from this. And then you can never appreciate, in hindsight, all of the growth that came from the hardship, because your life is just hard. So why try? Understand how this does nothing to serve you. And I'm very, very big on, if there's something in your life that isn't serving you, like, get rid of it. This thought doesn't serve you. It doesn't do anything to help you get out of the hardship, but then to also just love life. Life isn't perfect, but that doesn't mean that we should throw it out and not love it. There's so much beauty in the ugly. There's so much good in the bad. There's so much wonder in the hardship. And we have to be able to see all of it and hold all of it and value all of it, because that's just life. We don't just we don't just get rid of all of the bad in order to have the good, because how do we know that we have the good if we don't have the bad? I don't know. I know that that's probably not what you want to hear. Again, I feel like, a lot of the stuff I talk about on this podcast, it's like, you probably don't want to hear this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. It's not a hard life. Maybe it's a challenging season, but there's so much that can come from this. And maybe there's something in this that you need for said good upcoming thing. I don't know if it's a skill. I don't know if it's a job. I don't know if there's a person that you're going to cross paths with. I don't know if it's a hobby. I don't know if it's a revelation about who you are. I don't know. But maybe it's what you need for what's coming. You don't realize that you need it, but you do. And that's not fun either, because all of us, I'm sure, would much rather just have the good life, the easy street, handed to us on a silver platter. I know I would. I would much rather just have it handed to me, but that's not how it gets to work. And so we have to be able to open our eyes to see outside of just us, of just the life that we have here. So if you're struggling with this, I encourage you to surround yourself with people who have overcome maybe similar situations, if not the same situation that you're dealing with. Make sure that you are very strategic and diligent about not listening to voices that are dissenting voices. You want to listen to people who are going to encourage you, to validate your hardship, to validate the pain that comes with the disappointment or whatever it may be, but to also say, hey, understand I was there too, but I'm not there anymore. It doesn't have to end here for you either. You can still hope, but you have to want that. So it's not a hard life. Don't do that to yourself. That's not fair to you. Number 10, you've become more committed to explaining your pain rather than changing your future. This is very similar to identifying with suffering, and it's where a lot of people will just stay stuck. For years, forever, I don't know. I don't want to say it's necessarily fun, but it feels really good to go through something really hard and really heartbreaking and have a bunch of people surround you and just be like, oh, you poor thing. It's just so hard. You're just so awesome. I had a really tough breakup years ago. It was, I legitimately remember when I pulled the plug on the relationship, where I was and what I was doing. And I had friends actually upstairs waiting for me, and went up there, started weeping and crying. And they all just kind of like came around me and hugged me. And they were like, oh, we just can't believe it. We're so sorry, da, da, da. And even in the middle of all of my hardship, it felt really good to have them, get in my mess with me and validate my pain. Do we need that sometimes? Absolutely. When we're in the thick of the disappointment or whatever, sure. But I don't think it's right for us to just expect that everybody's going to stay there with us, because everybody got their own life to live. They got their own goals. They have their own dreams. They have their own path that they're all chartering. We have to continue to move forward. It's fine to take a pause and have our grief witnessed. We've talked about that before. But when we commit ourselves, because it feels so good to be cuddled, when we commit ourselves to this season or this thing that we don't want to let go of, we commit ourselves to explaining the pain, because what are we looking for when we're explaining the pain? Like, oh, well, here's just why it hurts so bad. Oh, this person did this and we were supposed to get married and then they left me at the altar, or, whatever horrific story that people conjure up. Why are they explaining it? Because they're looking for something. They're looking for that affirmation. They're looking for that validation, because it gives them the attention. It gives them, the feeling of being seen, or whatever it may be. It feels really good in that moment, but it's just a moment. And then what's on the other side of that? They have to explain more to get more from people, but there's no growth for them. They're just stuck in that season to get the emotional validation. A lot of people, when they get alone with themselves, in order to paint these pictures where they're explaining their pain, they will ask themselves, why me? Why does this happen to me? They're just so laser focused on this hardship that they're facing. And they're so laser focused on the grief and the disappointment and, the expectations of the loss or whatever. And I'm not trying to invalidate any of that. But when you just set your entire focus to it and you are trying to explain how it happened and why we got here and why it hurts so bad, and everybody's giving you the emotional validation that you want, it feels really good to just keep getting it. And then in order to conjure up more stories that explain to people why they should still feel sorry for you, you have to come up with more reasons. You have to keep answering, why me? Why did this happen? Why wasn't I enough? What did I do wrong? Where did I go wrong? What did I say? It's exhausting. And trust me when I say I've done it. Like, even in the last, I think, year, I've spiraled down this a couple of times, because the hardship is very real. The heartache is very real, and trying to process it is hard at times. And it's very easy to jump straight to explaining why it happened to me, of all people. Why didn't it go happen to Joe Schmo over there? I don't want to face it, but I'm doing it. Why am I having another thing? Why am I having another adversity? Why me? Me. Sure. I will be a very big champion of this. Understanding the pain, it does matter. Understanding your emotions, what is this telling me? How, what does this say? I think it's valid, but jumping straight to why me all of the time and buying into that, I don't think that that's what we need to do. Living inside the explanation of it, the situation, the hardship, the failure, the disappointment, the heartache, the pain, whatever, living there, pitching your tent there is what keeps you stuck. And you'll never leave there as long as you say, it's just me. But why me? Why did it, what did I do? This always happens. And when we pitch our tents in living in the explanation, that is what keeps us stuck. When we keep trying to explain the why me, it's because of my financial situation. Oh, well, it's because of my parents. Oh, well, it's because of my siblings. Or, oh, well, it's because, okay, why did this happen? Oh, well, it's because I'm attached to it. I'm the common denominator. And in my situation, when it comes with me, it goes back to my parents, or it goes back to how, I was always unattended as a child. I was always invisible. Well, that would be why it happened to me, because I'm invisible and all this stuff. Or why wasn't I enough? Well, I'm not enough because I'm invisible. Because guys, like when we pitch our tent there, the explanations can be infinite. In misery, it wants so badly to have company. And so not only are you going to say this to yourself, you're going to say it to anybody who will listen, because you need to be validated. That misery needs to be heard, because it's disempowering. When we delegate our contentment and our gratitude, and we delegate our joy to something outside of us and says, well, if it wasn't me, if I wasn't involved with this, then my life would be better. Or if it wasn't this situation that happened to me, then my life would be better. Every single time that we include a third party and we say that if it were just that over there, that could do better, how are we supposed to grow from this at all or find any joy at all? Because everything is outsourced. And so we buy into this explanation and we pitch our tent there and say, oh, well, I'm the common denominator, or, oh, well, it's my spouse, or, oh, well, it's my mom or my dad, or, oh, well. And the explanations can be infinite. And then we want other people to buy into it, to reinforce it, because this is where we're living now. We ain't gonna move. And it feels good to have somebody say, oh, well, poor you. Poor you. Your hardship is unique to you because you decided. I'd rather just explain why it hurts than change anything. Like no, hang on. If you'll just listen, you'll understand why my life will always be this way. And if you don't listen, then you're choosing not to understand me, which just reinforces the fact that I'm misunderstood. No. Let me tell you the full backstory. If you know the full backstory, then you'll feel sorry for me. And then somehow you get a pass and not having to change anything and not having to take any responsibility for anything that happens thereafter. No, it's everybody else's fault because they didn't listen to my story and they don't fully know that I deserve to be this upset and I deserve to pitch my tent in my misery because I'm committed to explaining this. My pain just needs to be explained and then they'll know. And then they'll understand why I get a pass at not having to change, but everybody else has to change and grow. They have to do better. They have to communicate better. They have to walk on eggshells. They have to listen longer. There's always something that some other third party has to do. But when we become committed to explaining our pain, we don't have to do anything other than force them to listen. And then we have to find more reasons as time goes on that just reinforces this pain. Oh, well, it's because of you. Now it's not just me. It's because of you and you. It's tale as old as time. And I've done it. And I feel like we all do it because it is so much easier. And I've said this so many times. It is so much easier to point the finger outside of ourselves and say, well, that's the reason why my life sucks. Rather than saying, you know what? That may have happened to me and it may have hurt like hell. Or I didn't ask for that. Or I wished it would have been better. And it's not. And that's not ideal. But you know what? There is something that I can do. There is something that I can change. It may not be them. It may not be the situation. It may not be how it happened or how it was said. I may not be able to make the deadline. I may not be able to do that, but I can show up differently. I can change my thoughts. I can believe better. I can pivot. I can take the detour instead of the original path. But that's freaking hard. And it's not fun. Matter of fact, it's much more fun to just point the finger at everybody else and allow them to just say, oh, you poor thing, and pet our ego. And at some point, when we all are faced with hardships, because life does not pick favorites, and we all have things that level us out, and we all have things that are disappointing, and we all have things that are heartbreaking. We all have to move from asking the question of what happened, what just happened to me, to what am I going to do with what happened to me? What am I going to do with it? Am I going to learn from this? Am I going to grieve it? Am I going to allow myself to say, you know what? It's not what I wanted. This is not ideal. Am I devastated? Yep. But I can't do anything. Am I going to allow myself to go through the grief process and learn and move and be grateful and believe that this is not unique to me and hear other voices of encouragement? Or am I going to do the alternative and say, I can either force this to work, and when it doesn't work, I'm going to start figuring out reasons why it's not working, but it all has to do with me. And I'm going to put blinders on and ignore the rest of the hardship of the rest of the world around me and believe that my life just sucks. What are you going to do? Yes, it happened. Or it didn't happen. Yes, they said that, or they didn't say that. Yes, they showed up, or they didn't show up. Maybe you did fail. Maybe you fell short. Congrats. Welcome to being human. You didn't meet the standard. I don't meet the standard like every day. But you know what? When I came into this world, nobody said I had to be perfect. And there's grace for all of that, because it's part of learning. We say, you know what? I'm sorry I didn't show up as my best. I'm going to choose to do better. That's the beauty of grace. Or we can say, oh, well, it's your fault that you set the standard. And we point the finger at everybody else. Like, guys, you have two, it's literally a fork in the road. You have two decisions. When you are met with hardship or disappointment or failure or shortcomings or whatever, you have two choices. And one can open the doors of opportunity and life full of color and joy. And sometimes it's not all that glamorous. Or you can choose the path of blaming everybody around you, and there's nothing good that can come from it, and you will become a miserable person. But it is so damn easy. At times, my life does suck. At times, it feels like it's going to do nothing but suck. But I have the ability to change my life. If there's something in my life that I don't like, I can change it. If I don't like what people are saying about me, I don't have to listen. I don't have to be their friend. If I don't like my job, I can leave. Is that a hard answer? Yes. But I don't have to work where I'm working. I don't have to have the career that I chose. Do I have to go to college? No, I can do something different. Do I have to believe that I'll amount to nothing just because it was what my parents said? No. I can change myself. However that looks, I cannot change other people. So you need to understand, yes, maybe your life is hard. Maybe right now it really feels like it sucks. And that may be true. And everybody listening right now has carried or is carrying something that sucks or is really hard. But hard is not hopeless. Pain is not proof that your life is bad. Grief is not proof that your future is gone. Setbacks are not proof that you're failing. Be careful not to build a case against your own life. You're only building a case against yourself when you do that. You only set the odds against yourself. Nobody else has to deal with the consequences of the case you build. Only you do. Because the quality of your life is determined less by what happens to you and more by what you decide those things mean. You are not stuck in a bad life. You are stuck in a story your pain is telling you. And the moment that you realize you are not experiencing your life, but you are experiencing your interpretation of life, you can change the interpretation and get your power back. Guys, I hope that was encouraging. I know that was full of truths, and I said it was going to be brutally honest. These are the things that I wish that I was taught when I was, approaching my 20s. Because now I'm getting ready to turn 30, and I've spent the last year rectifying and reconciling, every single time that I don't check the box when I told myself that I would. Reconciling, what does it say about me? And the devastation of, if I'm left alone to try and figure that out, well, then it has to be that it's my fault. It has to be that I did something wrong because other people are experiencing this. And, all of these traps I have fallen into. And it's because we all are sold a lie when we're in our teens. We're all sold a lie when we're young, that life is supposed to look a certain way. And in reality, in the truest form that I can say, life is what you make it. That's it. Nobody gets to tell you at what age you do different things, because that's your agency. That's your free will. If you want to do things, quote, out of order, okay. There are tons of things that I did out of order. There's tons of things I haven't done. There's tons of things I may never do when it comes to here's how you're supposed to live your life, the American dream, or you're supposed to do this and this and this and this, and that means success, or whatever. No, life is what you make it. You get to define success. A lot of people define it with wealth. I don't identify success with wealth. I know that Maybe there is a dictionary definition of success. But I personally have redefined a couple things in my life because I need to be able to set realistic expectations and standards for myself to encourage myself to keep going, but to also be content. I have this motto in my life where I always try to be grateful enough to be content where I am. I want to never take for granted where I am. I want to always be grateful for the things that I have so that if anything changes, I know that I led a life of gratitude and I didn't take that for granted. And then I'm not angry when it's gone because I didn't take it for granted. But I also never want to be satisfied. I want to be able to be content, to be deeply rooted, to give 110% of myself exactly where I am. But I also want to be able to dream. I want to be able to hope. I want to have vision, but I never want to attach myself to that and say, if I'm not where I should be, then this life is not enough. Because that's not contentment. So I want to be content, but never satisfied. And I think we should all live our lives in such a way that we make the life that we want and we are content with where we are. We can dream, but we can love life. And life really is what you make it. It's not graduate, get married, have the kids, get the white picket fence and the house and, all this stuff. And if that's, what you want, I think it's beautiful. But if you don't do it by 25 or 30 or whatever, we can't do that. Life is going to throw us curveballs. It's going to have detours. It's going to have its ups and downs, and it's going to be perfectly imperfect if we can see it in that way and love it with every ounce of who we are, every minute that we have on this earth, because the trip is very short. Life is short. Before I knew it, I was turning 30. Before I knew it, I blinked and I was married for 5 years. Before I knew it, I was graduating high school and moving out of my parents' house. Before I knew it, I was experiencing so many things. It's like I blink and it's passed me by. Now, did I think that at this age I would have a different life? Yes. But that doesn't negate that the life that I have right now is equally precious and beautiful. Life is what you make it. So love it. Love it as it is. Change what you can, accept what you can't. And live your life full of gratitude. Root yourself, ground yourself in gratitude. Be content, never satisfied, and know that your life as it is and who you are as you are is beautifully and wonderfully made. And I see that. And I hope that you see that and you can dream from this place. Know that I love you and that I'm rooting for you and I'm always here. Feel free to leave a comment down below if you need any sort of encouragement. I do respond to my comments. Please like this video and share it with somebody who needs to hear this. I do believe that this is extremely relevant across all generations. I just have seen way too many people who perpetuate these things. And really and truly, sure, maybe all of our circumstances being perfect in the way that we imagine would make life great, but how do we know if we have a great life? And I say all of that as lovingly as I can. Maybe you disagree, and that's okay. Tell me why in the comments, and I'd love to have a discussion with you. I'm also going to attach my email in the description of this podcast. If you'd like to chat privately, you can email me. Know that I love you, and I appreciate every minute and every hour that you guys spend listening to my podcasts. Let me know any future topics that you'd like me to discuss and cover in the future, and I will see you very soon.